How much is riding on these days of talks? How much do you think ultimately does make a decision for you within your portfolio?
Yeah, I think we've seen the market react really well over the last couple of weeks to certainly a reduction in some of the tariffs on China and other countries as well. This would be very critical, I think, especially for the tech sector, especially talking about export restrictions. There's certainly parts of the tech sector like NVIDIA, most recently the electronic design automation companies that have been very hurt by export restrictions and tariffs. So for certain pockets of the market, I think this would be very impactful to see some of these trade negotiations play out.
Tiffany, how much of a risk premium is the president? When you look at any corner of the technology market and you say, I am going to bet on a company that this president has recently spoken favorably about or not favorably about, as the case may be, I'm talking, of course, about the volatility that he brings to any trade negotiation.
Yeah, I think it creates a lot of pause when you're thinking about companies that may be in focus from the president. Companies that have been talked about or sectors that have been talked about recently. But, you know, the worry as an investor is what will happen next that we haven't planned for or that we didn't see coming. So I think that, you know, companies that have been spoken about, have been targeted, are reflecting a bit of a risk premium. And you see this in a lot of the tech companies that are trading, you know, at discounts to where they were trading over the last couple of years, certainly relative to their own multiples, but also relative to the index as well. So I think that's reflected in some of the stocks. But again, the concern is what happens next, because it's hard to predict.
Boy, does Tim Cook want to know what happens next as well. And his own stock trading below usual multiples. They've been in the eye of the storm when it comes to the supply chain side of things. What do you make of the desire to make companies ultimately build in the US, perhaps be less profitable? Does that make them as appetizing as an investment?
It certainly doesn't. It hurts the profit margins, as you mentioned. I think it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out, because it takes multiple years to build a factory here. It probably takes longer than you know, President Trump is going to be in office. So do the announcement we've seen from companies building here, you know, maybe some of them make sense economically, maybe some of them are paying lip service to the administration. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But it's interesting that Apple specifically has been a little bit more defiant.
More defiant, but also perhaps more distracted is what people worry about. The fact that they are not playing catch up to this AI game as people had hoped with WWDC. What did you make of the event?
Yeah, I thought the event was a little bit disappointing for Apple. We were expecting to hear more exciting updates around Apple Intelligence, around AI, maybe around AI being incorporated into Siri. And instead, I think we saw more updates on improving the user interface, more features on existing applications. You know, the applications that maybe incorporate the most AI would be their updates on visual intelligence or live translation. But those also feel like they're playing a little bit of catch up versus applications that are already in the market from other providers.
On my Bloomberg terminal, Apple seems to be the top holding in the Columbia Large Cap Growth Fund. So let me know if that's right. But I think, like, so far this year, Apple has been trading on trade risk, right, on tariff risk. And when we were like literally in the car on the way to Apple WWDC, we were asking ourselves, has this name started trading on that AI concern yet or not?
I think we've seen that a little bit around the WWDC event, and we certainly saw that after the event yesterday, where people were a little bit disappointed that there wasn't a big AI announcement coming out of the keynote presentation. So I think we're seeing that a little bit, but Apple, like a lot of big tech companies, I think are still trying to figure out their strategy around AI and are putting a lot of money behind it.
Tiffany, you set yourself up for this by saying the big question is what happens next. For the technology sector, what happens next?
I think we're still very positive on the tech sector for the rest of the year. There's a lot of good tailwinds for the sector. Obviously, tariffs and export restrictions could come out of left field for the rest of the year. But there's a lot of good tailwinds for earnings growth, including AI investment that continues to be very strong across multiple parts of the market. If we look at earnings growth expectations for the rest of the year or for the full year, the tech sector is still expected to grow much faster than the rest of the market. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the valuations across certain subgroups of tech look very attractive versus their history. So we're still very positive on the sector.
And are you positive on the commitment of capital coming from these companies? Look at what Mark Zuckerberg's doing, devoting his own time, his own dining table, but also sheer quantities of cash to make sure that he tries to win AGI, as it's known.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's not alone. Microsoft, Apple, Alphabet, Amazon are all making huge investments into AI, and I think that has a great knock-on effect for parts of the semiconductor equipment, parts of software, other parts of the economy, including industrials, that all feed into that AI infrastructure.